And today we're going to look at a very interesting dynamic of that I doubt many of us would have thought of on our own or would have said, okay, that really is something that's important spiritually. But James is going to highlight it, and I think that when we're done with what he has to say to us, we're going to agree with him. He wants to talk about how important controlling our tongues are to our spiritual life and authentically fleshing out the Christ life. So let's pick it up where we left it off last, if you were with us. James chapter 3, and he begins this way. Dear brothers and sisters, not many of you should become teachers in the church, for we who teach will be judged more strictly. Indeed, we all make many mistakes, for if we could control our tongues, we would be perfect and could also control ourselves in every other way. Okay, let's stop there. James starts this conversation in an interesting way. Don't presume to be a teacher. It's not that it's a bad thing or that those who do teach should be looked down on in any way. In fact, the Bible tells us that those who teach within the context of the church should actually be held in honor. This is what the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy. He said the elders, and by the way, the word elder or presbyteros in the Greek is used interchangeably and synonymous with the word for pastor, which is poime, as well as the word for bishop, which is episkopos. And so the pastors or the elders or the bishops, they were all three used interchangeably and synonymously. So whenever you read the word elder, you're just reading pastor. So the elders who direct the affairs of the church well are worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. The Bible also clearly teaches in many of the lists in Ephesians 4 and Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12 and 1 Peter 4, when it gives lists of Holy Spirit-given gifts, teaching is among them. So what is James after here? Here's how Eugene Peterson paraphrased it. Not many of you should presume to be teachers. The key word there, presume, meaning someone who presumes to know more than others know, someone who thinks they are someone that other people should listen to, someone who takes it upon themselves that they should be counseling other people, someone who presumes are living in a way that others could learn from and should learn from, someone who loves an audience, loves the sound of their own voice, loves to tell everyone else what's wrong with their lives, how to live, how to do better. James is after an attitude here. If the words of our mouth are impeccable, always right, always on target, always wise, always sound, always edifying, then we would be perfect, because the tongue really is the control center of the soul. So presuming to teach others as opposed to answering a call based on gifting is the ultimate pride issue. So do you see how James is starting this off? It's the foundation for everything he's going to explore in this section of his letter. James wants to elevate the tongue in such a way that we see that it sits in the driver's seat for our entire spiritual life. If you could control the tongue, your whole life could be controlled. That's how significant it is. So right at the beginning, James says that the path to a truly spiritual life goes through our mouths. A bit in the mouth of a horse, he writes, controls the whole horse. A small rudder on a huge ship in the hands of a skilled captain sets a course in the face of the strongest winds. A word out of your mouth may seem of no account, but it can accomplish nearly anything or destroy it. Okay, here's the big idea. Something small can exact enormous impact for either good or ill. James knows that we can play down the role of our mouth and our tongues and our words and our speech in terms of our spiritual lives. It's a gross mistake, but we do it. So James says, all right, let me see if I can get this across. You know how small a bit in the horse of a mouth is. It's small, but it controls that incredibly powerful animal completely. Or think of a ship, huge, massive, controlled by this little rudder. Now, think of the vast expanse of your life, all of your actions, all of your relationships, the state of your soul. It too is something large that's controlled by something small, your tongue. So, do you make light of it? Or is it something that you take as seriously as James says that we should? Well, let's listen to what our tongues are saying. Think about our phrases. We talk about little white lies. Now, what do we mean by that? That they don't really count. Or how about when we talk about a slip of the tongue? Like it was no big deal. And then there's the way we self-justify, saying things like, well, all I said was the truth. Or someone says, well, I was just being honest. Or, you know me, I always speak my mind, all of which are often ways of justifying saying something really nasty, rude, out of line, hurtful, or tactless. Really, have you noticed how we lead in to saying things that are really snarky? Or when we slander, gossip, make a cutting remark, or criticize? Listen, this is what we'll say. We'll say, well, I don't mean to gossip, but, and then we gossip. Or, I love this person, I really do, but, and then we say something that is anything but loving about this person. Now, what we say can also be powerful in a good way. The Bible is very clear about the potency of encouraging words and uplifting words, and complimentary words are just as powerful in their ability to build up as they are to tear down, which is why it's so tragic that we have such a hard time doing it. This is true in my life. Maybe it's not true in your life, but I find that it's so easy to make a cutting remark or tear down, and hard to just generously build someone up. Why is there that tension in our lives? It's as if we can't give a compliment without adding a little takedown. It's like we give with one hand, but then we want to take away with the other. Here's what I mean. Before we compliment someone or encourage them, we feel like we have to say something like, now, don't get a big head, but, and then we give them whatever we were going to say to compliment them. Why do we say that? It's almost an insult, as if the person can't handle a compliment, or that complimenting them is almost inherently risky to their soul. Or we feel like we have to give them spiritual instruction about how to take an encouraging word. Like, I know that what you have is a gift from God, and you can't take any credit, and he should get all the glory, and that he could get anyone else he wanted to do what you just did, but you did sing that song very nicely. What kind of compliment is that? Like I said, it's almost like we have to take something away from them, or put them down, or put them in their place before we say something a little nice. Well, James isn't done. He wants us to see, if we haven't already, again, how serious this really is, that what comes out of our mouth really is a force. So much of a force that it's more than we could possibly imagine. So let's read where he takes us next. He said, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire, and the tongue is a flame of fire. It is a whole world of wickedness, corrupting your entire body. It can set your whole life on fire, for it is set on fire by hell itself. Here's how Eugene Peterson paraphrases it. He said, it only takes a spark, remember, to set off a forest fire. A careless or wrongly placed word out of your mouth can do that. By our speech, we can ruin the world, turn harmony to chaos, throw mud on a reputation, send the whole world up in smoke, and go up in smoke with it. Smoke right from the pit of hell. Now, I know that's very strong language, but that's because James knows how serious it is and how lightly we can tend to take it. And what a powerful image, particularly as we are kind of reading this from our vantage point today. You know, a couple of weeks ago, here at least in the Carolinas, and this affected many places across the United States, but here in the Carolinas on the East Coast, we were dealing with the haze of smoke from a fire in Oregon, on the other side of the country. At its peak, the bootleg fire covered over 400,000 acres. It was so large. You may have read this. I found this was fascinating. It was creating its own weather. The heat produced pyrocumulus clouds, and those clouds became their own thunderstorms with lightning and strong winds, all from what probably could have been something as simple as a single match, one discarded cigarette, a simple spark. That's the way our tongue works. A single word or sentence or conversation can destroy a life. It can separate a marriage. It can wreak havoc in an organization. It can ruin a reputation. It can turn brother against brother and neighbor against neighbor and nation against nation. Just look at the things coming out of our mouths. Look at what it did over the last 20 months. Just what was spewing out of our mouths. So let's take the tongue as serious as James is asking us to. If we were to put some spiritual controls on our mouths, what would those controls look like? If we were to run what we say through some kind of filter on the front end before we say it, that would clean things up and guard our souls and protect other people on the receiving end, what would those filters be? You can almost think of it like, what if we could have a built-in virus protection that warns us about a sketchy website before it lets us go there? What if there was a set of filters that we could run through before we said something that would help us know whether this is something we should say or not? Well, let me suggest a few and see how these feel. Before you say something, first ask yourself, is what I am going to say true? Now, I hope that's first and foremost when you're thinking. If you know it's not true, or you're not sure it's true, or if it's just rumor, or if it's a second or third hand report, don't say it, because it doesn't pass the truth test. So that's first. Here's the second filter. Is what I'm going to say helpful? Because even if it gets past the first filter, meaning it really is true, it doesn't mean it's helpful. In other words, is this going to be encouraging? Does it build people up? Our words should heal and bring life and benefit those who listen. I know a lot of things about people that are true, that if I were to say them or repeat them or pass them on would be sin, because there'd be no point in it except to tear them down, assassinate their character, needlessly point out the sin in their life, which I might add, we all have plenty in ourselves to go around. Truth itself is not enough. It has to pass the why test. Why should I say this? What is my agenda? Am I trying to hurt or help? Build up or, arouse suspicion? Well, here's another filter. Is what I'm going to say being said to the right person? Meaning, am I talking to the one that I should be talking to? Let's say you've got an issue with somebody, and should you talk about that issue with 6 other people? 3 other people? 1 other person? The answer is no, no, and no. So biblically, there's only one person you should talk to about it, the person you have the issue with. And you say, well, I was just trying to get some counsel. Well, no, that's the spiritual guise you put over it simply to bring other people in and get them on your side and spread it around. No, there's only one person you should talk to, the person you have the issue with. Now, let's say you've done that. You've gone to them to try to work things out. Should you then go to another person with what you have said? You didn't talk to anybody else on the front end, but you plan on having fun on the back end because you did the right thing and talked to the person you had an issue with. Does that pass the sniff test? It shouldn't. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, man, this is taking all the fun out of life. Well, let me add to that because it's going to get even less fun. Here's another filter. Is what I'm going to say loving? And that may be the biggest filter of all. Because if you're seeking to be loving toward that person, you wouldn't say something that wasn't true. You wouldn't say something that wasn't helpful. And you wouldn't say anything about them behind their back. But it's still a good separate filter on its own because it also speaks to how you say things. Will it be gracious? Will it be humble? Will it give the other person the benefit of the doubt? Or will it be accusational, judgmental, sanctimonious, and mean-spirited? This is so important of a filter for our mouths. James isn't going to let up. This is what he continues to write. He said, this is scary. You can tame a tiger, but you can't tame a tongue. It's never been done. The tongue runs wild, a wanton killer. With our tongues, we bless God our Father. With the same tongues, we curse the very men and women he made in his image. Curses and blessings out of the same mouth. Friends, this can't go on. A spring doesn't gush fresh water one day and brackish the next, does it? Apple trees don't bear strawberries, do they? Raspberry bushes don't bear apples, do they? You're not going to dip into a polluted mud hole and get a cup of clear, cool water, are you? Okay, this is James' final point. How we talk to each other and about each other should reflect how we would talk to God and about God. Or at the very least, reflect how God would talk to and about them. What James is wanting to expose is this. Someone who is a Christ follower honors God with his mouth, sings about him, prays to him, and then turns around and verbally savages another person. They slander, backstab, criticize, take down, belittle, mock, spread suspicion, undermine, fault find. James is wanting to give us the last 5% here. That's not just sinning with our mouths. That's undermining everything we say we believe about God and our relationship with God. Because the call in our life is love God, love people. If you love God, but you don't love people, then something is wrong with the loving God part, because they are his people, his children. It would be like somebody coming to me and saying, Jim, I love your teaching. I love you as a pastor. I'm appreciative of your writing. And then they turn around and just tear down one of my children, one of my 4 precious children, without grace or mercy, as if somehow they can be fine with me, but cruel to them. They can praise me, but condemn my child. Do you see how offensive that would be to me, and how it would make their words about me or to me meaningless? James says that's what we're doing with God. We praise him and then we curse his children. But it's even more toxic than that. They're not just God's children, but as followers of Christ, they're our brothers and sisters, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons. We're part of this close-knit family of faith, the new community where the right use of the tongue should be seen by the world, where love and grace should flow most freely. Yet James says you're almost worse at it than those who don't follow Christ. And that's why James is coming down on this so hard. And well, he should. And we need him to, now more than ever. So let's just add one more filter, okay? Number 5, just keep your mouth shut. I need to just keep my mouth shut, really. Because the more we talk, the more we'll sin. It's true. In fact, this is in the Bible. In the great wisdom book called the Proverbs, it says this: too much talk leads to sin. Be sensible and keep your mouth shut. Now that's one I need pasted on my forehead. The truth is, the more I open my mouth, the more I lie and gossip and cause conflict and exaggerate and make promises I can't keep or boast, say things that are hurtful, contentious, or rude, the less I speak, the more I tell the truth, speak well of others, spread peace, demonstrate humility, keep my word, say things that are careful, measured, sensitive, and understanding. So if you can't manage the first 4 filters, if you can't speak the truth in a helpful way to the right person in a loving way, then go for that last one. Just shut up.